There's a thought that often gets thrown about when we think about and discuss professional athletes. Namely, that it often feels like they get more tries than the regular Joe, especially when they screw up, and that they are somehow and in some way immune from the consequences of the regular person and of regular life. Now, part of that is because our shows and movies have presented that reality to us and we just kind of accept it. And also part of it is simple reality. Sometimes athletes do get away with things, and sometimes, sadly, it is enabled. Years ago, the general manager for the NFL team, the Arizona Cardinals, Steve Keim, might have accidentally said the quiet part out loud. It was before the NFL draft, and he was asked if players ever can have a cutoff where their bad behavior off the field would be enough or it simply wasn't worth the trouble to take the player. And Keim said the following, quote, "I've said this before. If Hannibal Lecter ran a 4.3 40-yard dash, we'd probably diagnose it as an eating disorder." End quote. Again, Hannibal Lecter ate people. Now, there are plenty of times where athletes get away with things that they absolutely should not, and the general public understandably gets super frustrated with it, to the point where it feels like the public is just waiting for an athlete to screw up so we can just jump on him. Like the Green Goblin said in the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, let me do my best Willem Dafoe here, "But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you." I am not doing another Willem Dafoe voice again. Now, obviously, that's a bit dramatic, but is that statement wrong? Perhaps by the end of this series, we'll have a bit more definitive of an answer. I'm Mike GW, and you're listening to Surreal Sports Stories. If there is a specific position in professional sports that's viewed as the absolute stereotype of an out-of-touch, rich drama queen who has no connection to life with the rest of us, it would be an NFL wide receiver. And it's not hard to see why. Over the course of the 20th century, football kind of made a shift in the style of play. It used to be the old 3 downs in a cloud of dust style, where you just ran the ball, and then that's it. Basically, up through the 1980s, if a team wanted to win, they needed to run the ball and have a quality running back that they could trust to carry and move the yards anywhere from 25 to 35 times a game. And that's how names like Jim Brown, Walter Payton, Tony Dorsett, and, yes, even O.J. Simpson made their bones and made their fame in a league that was tailored to their skill set. That's basically been football since its inception. Now, don't get me wrong, the forward pass was a crucial part of the game, too. I mean, I name-dropped several Hall of Fame running backs, yet there were equally as many legendary quarterbacks in the 20th century as well. I mean, guys like Joe Montana, Dan Marino, John Elway, I could go on in detail. But they didn't start becoming the focal point of teams in the league until the 1980s. And as it turns out, fans really liked to see passing. I mean, think of it this way. If you're a casual football fan, you might not appreciate the intricacies of running lanes opening up and a good running back slipping through to find success as his linemen crush somebody ahead of him. But you can definitely understand the excitement of watching a cool-as-a-cucumber quarterback throwing the ball deep to some athletic talent downfield for an exciting pass and catch. It's just what the people want. Now, quarterbacks became the face of the league. But, it's 2 to tango. Who are they throwing to? Because of that, a new position was about to open up as a talking point of excitement: wide receivers. And at the risk of sounding reductive, these 3 positions kind of carry with them certain archetypes. Running backs always had this sort of working man persona because it's rough on the body to be a running back. Quarterbacks sort of operated like CEOs of a firm because they ran everything, and if necessary, they needed to step in and do what needed to be done. And what were wide receivers? Divas. I'm not even kidding. The word diva is frequently tossed at wide receivers, especially the good ones. As one writer put it in Mel magazine, quote, "Wide receivers are usually the first to balance the most of the NFL's conservative notions about expression. They're the players who, for good or for ill, demand to be seen as individuals with feelings. End quote. I mean, there's a reason why in that film Jerry Maguire, the bombastic Rod Tidwell, played by Cuba Gooding Jr., is a wide receiver and not a running back. Now, wideouts might not have been the first players to be the focal point of attention, but Mel Magazine's writer clocked it thusly, remarking that, quote, receivers became mainstream superstars who took full advantage of the increased media attention around football, using press conferences and interviews to make themselves larger-than-life figures, end quote. Maybe one of the biggest examples of this outsized ego boost comes from former receiver Keyshawn Johnson. In 1996, Key was drafted first overall in the NFL draft after a successful time in college with the University of Southern California Trojans. As a Notre Dame guy, I'm obliged to say, ew, but whatever. Now, Keyshawn was a really, really good wide receiver in his NFL career, grabbing more than 800 catches and more than 10,000 yards receiving, but what he really grabbed attention for was his behavior off the field. Specifically, he courted controversy by co-authoring a book with ESPN's Shelley Smith that was titled, Just Give Me the Damn Ball. It was released right after his rookie season was over, and in it, Keyshawn wasn't exactly shy about his feelings. Now that year, his team, the New York Jets, had gone a gruesome 1 win and 15 losses, and Key had some thoughts. Thoughts that included calling his fellow wide receiver Wayne Chrebet a team mascot, and not as a compliment, the quarterback a stiff puppet, and the offensive coordinator, aka the guy calling the plays, an old fool. Whew. The book went off like a depth charge, and Key has kept the reputation of being a, shall we say, large personality ever since. Now, there have been some other receivers over the years that have grasped the brass ring of diva stardom from Keyshawn. Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Des Bryant, Chad Johnson, who changed his last name to Ocho Cinco after his jersey number 85, only to change it back, and of course, Antonio Brown, who is worth several episodes for those of you curious. We just don't have the time. But even they couldn't hold a candle to the poster boy for receiver divas, the Whitney Houston to their Mariah Careys, Michael Irvin. Now, Michael Irvin is one of the best receivers in the history of the NFL. But he's also maybe one of the craziest guys to have played in the NFL. He was equally known for his partying ways off the field as he was for his abilities on the field. Now, he was a star for the Dallas Cowboys during their dynasty days of the 1990s, but he also racked up a rap sheet just as prolific. In 1996, for example, he and several other players were found in a hotel room with copious amounts of marijuana and cocaine. Remember, this is the 1990s, not the more loosey-goosey days of today when it comes to marijuana. Now, there are lots of other instances where Irvin was found with drugs, out partying late, or otherwise inclined. But maybe the most insane diva incident of his career is when he stabbed a teammate in the neck with a pair of scissors at a barber shop. No, I will not provide further context. That's for another episode. Now, what's my point? Basically, the public has been given plenty of evidence that wide receivers will act out, they will crash out, and we're trained to believe the worst in any situation regarding them. Now, sometimes this is absolutely deserved. Again, looking at you, Antonio Brown. But maybe it isn't deserved in every case? Maybe, just maybe, we paint all of them with the same brush, even if the circumstances of their case is a little bit different? Because sometimes there's a lot more to a story than just one infamous moment in a person's life. Which brings me to the subject of this series, Plaxico Burress. Now, Plaxico Burress, nicknamed Plax by his teammates and the media at large, was born in Norfolk, Virginia, which is right around the Chesapeake Bay and in that pocket that also has Newport News in it. Why bring that up? Well, as it turns out, a lot of pro athletes have come out of that neck of Virginia. Maybe part of that has to do with the fact that there are some rough pockets around the area. Now, Plax was one of 3 sons to a single mother, Adelaide V. Burress. She's also referred to as Vicky in some sources, so I'm going to assume that the V there is short for Vicky. Now, Mama Burress was tough as nails and a bit of a badass. She was a former track star at Norfolk State University. She picked up a master's degree at the age of 35. And again, single mom with 3 sons. That's not easy. Oh, did I mention the fact that she also was working 3 jobs at the time? Nurse, school bus driver, and gas station attendant? I mean, they were living also in Virginia Beach, the tough part of town. Basically, Plaxico is starting on the difficult end of the scale. ProFootballHistory.com describes the public housing development that they all lived in as, quote, crime-infested and seedy, and that Mama Burress paid a whopping $1 a month in rent. Look, I know we all complain these days that the rent is too damn high, and it is, but I shudder to think what life is like in areas where the rent is too damn low. No surprise, then, that Mama Burress didn't exactly suffer fools lightly. She was tough, and she was the undisputed boss of the household. When young Plaxico Burress thought his mom was doing the most, years later he would write in his autobiography, Giant, The Road to the Super Bowl, quote, "The way I grew up, we had hard times, we had rough times, but I have no regrets about how I grew up. I wouldn't change a thing," end quote. Now, that ProFootballHistory.com article has several anecdotes about how intense his mom was, all in the name of keeping her son in line. Some were benign, like when Plax came home at 1:30 in the morning after spending the night out with friends, only to see his mom awake and reading a book and warning him that he couldn't burn the candle at both ends. He had a high school playoff game the next day, and he didn't do so well. Other instances, though, were more severe. Quote, "When Plaxico was around 15 or 16 years old, he was hanging out with his friends and playing spades. He and his friends were mingling with girls, playing loud music, and drinking a bit. They heard a knock on the door. Without realizing who it was, they nonchalantly let the visitor inside. Adelaide Burress burst through the door and snatched her son from his chair. She slapped him on the neck countless times on their way back home. Plaxico never hung out at that house again." End quote. Aggressive? Yeah, sure. But Virginia Beach was rough, and young Plax saw plenty of violence and criminality go down around the neighborhood. Years later, he would make a point of noting that of his childhood friends, a lot were either dead or in jail for stupid stuff, quote, like an armed robbery or carrying a concealed weapon, end quote. Now, Plaxico was a great athlete even at a young age, though he thought his future was on the basketball court. It wasn't until his junior year of high school that the head football coach at Green Run High School, Alicia Harris, made a house call to the Burress home and told him he was the best player he'd ever coached and that he had a God-given talent to play football. Plaxico, thinking that his future was as an NBA star, not an NFL star, responded that he just played football because his buddies played. But his mom, who overheard the conversation, told her son that he should try devoting himself to the gridiron. He listened. It was a smart move. During Plax's senior year, he was ranked by several major recruiting publications as the #1 high school wide receiver in the country. Dude could ball. His coach encouraged him to attend college summer camps, and the young Plax was so good at the University of Florida camp that the Gators started to recruit him heavily. And Burress wanted to go to Florida. His grades, however, were a problem. Now here's the thing. I'm going to tell you a number, and I challenge you to hold off judgment until you hear the rest of the story. It's crucial, not only for this moment, but also for the entirety of this tale that I'm spinning. When Plaxico Burress' senior year at Green Run High began, his cumulative GPA was 1.6. That's not a number that gets accepted anywhere, maybe even not at some junior colleges. But here's the thing. When given a chance and some love and support, Plaxico busted his butt. With his high school football coach literally driving him to nearby Ocean Lake High School for extra tutoring sessions, Burress worked as hard as he could to get his GPA at least to a 2.0, which would be the absolute minimum for major colleges to recruit him. Well, Plax made the honor roll his senior year, and he got himself to that 2.0 GPA. Over the course of the year, though, a lot of the major schools that had previously been chomping at the bit to pick him up started to back off because of his grades. Even Florida lost interest. But through it all the way up in Lansing, Michigan, there was one school that kept the faith that this kid could figure it out, and that was the Michigan State Spartans. Plax wanted to reward their loyalty. Even so, his improved GPA couldn't quite cover for his subpar scores on the SAT and the ACT. Things seemed hopeless. But the Michigan State recruiters had a suggestion. He could go to a prep school for a year to get his grades up, and then he could transfer over, or he could go to junior college. Plaxico's uncle Adrian was willing to lend him $25,000 to get his foot in the door, but only one school was willing to take a shot: Fork Union Military Academy, a place that ProFootballHistory.com described as, quote, a no-nonsense military type of atmosphere where the cadets shaved their heads and facial hair, wore uniforms, scrubbed toilets, and took orders from their superiors, end quote. Plax might have hated it, but he was used to someone being in charge and taking none of his crap. Mama Burress, after all. So Plaxico goes to Fork Union, and he played and studied like a man desperate to get out of there and on to the next stage of his life. Case in point, on his first play as a member of Fork Union, he caught a pass and then ran 80 yards for a touchdown. First play of the game, too. He finished the game with over 150 receiving yards, with a watching college coach telling him that he'd be an All-American wide receiver someday. Meanwhile, Plaxico passed the SAT, and basically immediately Michigan State came over and was like, alrighty, Fork Union, thanks for holding on to our boy, now gimme, and pulled him out of the school. Now, Plaxico had to sit for the remainder of the year because that's what the old NCAA transfer rules were like, before there was a transfer portal. Remember those days? Crazy, isn't it? But then he would suit up in 1998 for the Michigan State Spartans and his sophomore year. It was coming to college that Burress got that culture shock that so many of us get when we step out of our bubble for the first time. As told in ProFootballHistory.com, quote, when Plaxico first attended classes at Michigan State in 1997, he rubbed elbows with Spartans basketball players Morris Peterson and Mateen Cleaves. They were shocked at Plaxico's fashion sense. He was probably the only student who wore yellow Timberland boots on campus. Everyone else wore Rockports. Plaxico also wore a hat and baggy jeans to complement his Timberland boots. His fellow students thought he was so different than everybody else. In Burress's eyes, it was a reality check. It made him realize that going to college was one of the best decisions he had ever made. End quote. But don't take the word from Pro Football History, take it from the man himself, who remarked in his 2009 autobiography, quote, I'm so glad I went to college. If I just stayed back in Virginia my whole life like so many of them guys I grew up with, I never would have known any of this. End quote. Now, Plax didn't immediately get along with the head coach of the Spartans. He was understandably upset when, during his freshman year, one of his best friends who played for the Florida Gators fractured his neck, and when he asked the head coach if he could visit his friend in the hospital, to his surprise, his coach said no. As Burress wrote years later, quote, he wouldn't let me go see my best friend in the hospital who's almost paralyzed. I didn't like him, and we didn't get along well. End quote. Burress would eventually get over it. And I mean, you kind of have to. Because when your head coach is Nick Saban, a.k.a. the greatest college football coach of all time, you kind of do what he asks. And besides, they didn't have to like each other. They just had to mesh in order for the Spartans to succeed. And that's exactly what they did. Now, to further visualize what I'm about to tell you, you need to picture what Plaxico Burress looks like, especially in comparison to the guys he lined up against. Most wide receivers and cornerbacks, the defenders that cover them, are kind of small and a little on the skinnier side. You're pretty big if you're around 6 feet tall and if you weigh around 180 pounds. All that to say is that Plaxico Burress was 6'5" and weighed 235 pounds in his college days. To say he was a size mismatch is a huge understatement. He was bigger than all the others, and he was just as fast. It was like a cheat code to throw him that ball. How much of a cheat code? Well, according to Michigan State's own website, and let me clear my throat, quote, during his collegiate career, Burress became the first Spartan player ever to record back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons. Despite playing only 2 seasons, he still ranks among MSU's all-time top 10 in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdown receptions. Burress had 7 career 100-yard receiving games, including 3 in 1999, a first-team All-Big Ten selection as a junior in 1999. Burress caught 66 passes for 1,142 yards and 12 touchdowns. In his final game in a Spartan uniform, he earned Florida Citrus Bowl MVP honors after catching 13 passes for 185 yards and 3 scores in MSU's 37-34 victory over Florida. End quote. Hey, how about that? He stuck it to the school that didn't have faith in him. But the biggest highlight for Burress, other than that Citrus Bowl win, though, was probably Michigan State's 1999 game against their hated rival Michigan. At the end of the third quarter, the Spartans were up 27-10, and it looked like they were going to clinch the victory as long as they were able to play good football. There was just one small problem. The quarterback for Michigan was some kid from California named Tom Brady. And Brady, even back then, did not like losing. He would finish the game with almost 300 passing yards, a touchdown, and at one point he completed 15 passes in a row. He would help the Wolverines score 31 points. Unfortunately for him, Plaxico Burress also had a monster game that night, racking up a school record 255 receiving yards for the single game, and the Spartans would score 34 points. Spoilers, this won't be the last time that Plaxico Burress gets one over on Tom Brady, but that's for another time. So in such a short amount of time, Plaxico Burress has gone from a kid from Norfolk with a sub-2 GPA to maybe the best wide receiver in the country. And in 2000, the Pittsburgh Steelers made him the 8th overall pick in the NFL draft. Not bad for a kid who thought that he was going to be an NBA star. It's at this point, though, that we have to address the elephant in the room. Plaxico Burress has gone from being a kid who came from nothing, and now he was going to be given everything. Everything he could have desired, and things he didn't even know he desired, were now going to be a mere snap of the finger away. And as much as his mother loved and defended and protected him, that protection couldn't last forever. Now Plaxico Burress was an NFL wide receiver, and he was about to become famous. But that's the thing about fame. It can be quite poisonous. As author Alan Moore once put it, quote, "I tend to think that what fame has done is to replace the sea as the element of choice of adventure for young people. If you were a dashing young man in the 19th century, you would have probably wanted to run away to sea, just as in the 20th century, you might decide that you want to run away and form a pop band. The difference is that in the 19th century, before running away to sea, you would have had at least some understanding of the element that you were dealing with and would have perhaps, say, learned to swim. The thing is, there is no manual for how to cope with fame. So you'll get some otherwise likable young person who has done one good comic book, one good film, one good record, and suddenly told that they are a genius, who believes it, and who runs out laughing and splashing into the billows of celebrity, and whose heroin-sodden corpse is washed up a few weeks later in the shallows of the tabloids." End quote. A bit morbid, sure, but not necessarily 100% inaccurate. There's a big jump from being a star in Lansing, Michigan, to being a star in the NFL. And this was all during the peak of the diva wide receiver era, when even the least dramatic of them would get sucked up into the storm. And as a young Plaxico Burress would discover, he would be no different. Next time on Surreal Sports Stories. Fresh out of college and in the NFL, Plaxico Burress finds success, fame, and controversy. A turbulent time where he will be forced to make some major changes in his life, lest the vortex of fame swallow him whole. Sources for these episodes include NJ.com, ESPN.com, Mel Magazine, ProFootballHistory.com, the autobiography of Plaxico Burress, and many more. If you like the show, you can find Surreal Sports Stories wherever you listen to your podcasts. We upload on Wednesdays. And now you can find us on YouTube. Video forms of the podcast can be found on the Surreal Sports Pod YouTube channel. That's at Surreal Sports Pod. And you can expect uploads of the new episodes the day they drop on audio. So if you want an early peek at the stuff coming down the pike, do us a favor and smash that subscribe button and leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll also be uploading the archive of old episodes onto YouTube over time, with audio cleanups and adjustments to make the pivot to video even cleaner. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This has been Surreal Sports Stories. You've been amazing, and I've been Mike GW. Stay steady, y'all.